Thugs tries to bully a royal guard. What happens next will shock you.
Alex Carter, the royal guard, stood motionless outside the gates of Buckingham Palace, his red uniform crisp and his tall hat sitting perfectly on his head. The sun glinted off the gold buttons on his jacket, making him look more like a statue than a man. Tourists gathered around, snapping pictures and whispering to each other. Some smiled, some pointed, and others laughed, but the guard didn't flinch. He was trained to hold his ground no matter what, but not everyone came to admire him. At the edge of the crowd, a group of thugs stood huddled together. They weren't taking pictures. They weren't impressed by the guard's discipline. Instead, they were watching him like hunters circling their prey. Their leader, Darren Holt, was hard to miss. He wore a black leather jacket and expensive sunglasses. Even though it wasn't that sunny, his hair was slicked back, and he carried himself with the kind of arrogance that made people uneasy. "Look at this guy," Darren said, his voice loud enough for the crowd to hear. He pointed straight at the guard. "Thinks he's tough just standing there. I bet he won't even blink if I slap him." The thugs laughed. "Bet he's scared under that hat," one of them said, nudging Darren. "Or maybe he's sleeping," another added. The crowd grew uneasy. Some people whispered for someone to call security, but others took out their phones, hoping to catch something exciting. Darren turned to one of his friends, Ryan, who was already holding his phone up and live streaming the whole thing. "All right, people," Darren shouted into the camera. "We're at Buckingham Palace, and we're about to see if the royal guard is really as tough as they say." The thugs cheered, hyping Darren up as comments poured into the live stream. "Bet he won't move. Push him. Let's see what happens. Guards are just for show. He can't do anything." The guard didn't react. He stood still, eyes locked straight ahead, but inside, his heart beat a little faster. This wasn't just some random prank. He could tell by the way Darren and his crew kept glancing toward the side gate near the palace loading area. Something else was happening. Alex's instincts kicked in. He'd served in the military before becoming a royal guard, and he knew how to spot trouble. His gut told him this was more than it seemed, but he couldn't act, not yet. Darren stepped closer, walking right up to Alex's face. "What's the matter, soldier boy? Cat got your tongue." Darren waved a hand in front of Alex's eyes. "Say something. Or are you just a doll in a costume?" The thugs laughed again, but Alex didn't even blink. "Maybe he needs a little push," Darren said, smirking. Suddenly, he reached out and pushed Alex's shoulder. It wasn't hard, but it was enough to make the crowd gasp. Alex's muscles tightened, but he didn't move. Not yet. "Whoa," Ryan shouted, zooming in with his camera. "Did you see that? He's still frozen. What a joke." "Try harder," one of the thugs called out. Darren grinned. He grabbed Alex's hat, snatching it off his head and holding it up like a trophy. The crowd gasped again. Some people yelled for him to stop, but Darren just laughed, waving the hat around for the camera. "Looks like I win," Darren said. "What are you going to do about it, soldier boy?" Alex's jaw tightened, but he stayed still. His training told him not to react unless the threat became serious. But this wasn't just a prank anymore. It was crossing a line. And then Alex noticed something. Near the side gate, a man in a worker's uniform was acting strange. He was moving quickly, avoiding the crowd, and carrying a large box toward a truck parked near the loading dock. Alex's pulse quickened. This wasn't just bullying, it was a distraction. Darren's voice snapped him back to the moment. "Come on," Darren said, waving the hat in front of Alex. "Do something, or are you too scared?" Suddenly, a voice cut through the noise. "Put the hat down." The crowd turned to see an elderly man with a cane stepping forward. His voice was calm but firm, and his sharp eyes locked onto Darren. "Who's this? Your granddad?" Darren sneered. The old man didn't flinch. "You're making a mistake, son. Put the hat down before you regret it." "Or what?" Darren smirked. "You gonna hit me with your stick." The thugs laughed again, but the old man didn't move. Instead, he tapped his cane twice against the cobblestones. Tap, tap. Alex's ears perked up. That wasn't just a noise. It was a military signal, a warning. The crowd shifted nervously. Some people pulled out their phones, but others looked around, sensing the change in the air. Darren took a step closer to Alex, raising the hat like he was about to throw it on the ground. But before he could, Alex moved. It was quick, too quick for Darren to react. In one smooth motion, Alex's hand shot out, snatching the hat back and stepping forward so fast that Darren stumbled backward, almost dropping his phone. The crowd fell silent. "Whoa," Ryan gasped. "Did you see that?" Alex's eyes locked onto Darren's, calm but deadly serious. "Step back," Alex said quietly. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the noise like a knife. Darren froze. The confidence drained from his face as he stared into Alex's eyes. Behind him, the thugs began backing away, and the old man with the cane smirked. "Good choice," the old man said softly. But Alex wasn't looking at Darren anymore. His eyes had already moved back to the side gate, where the worker with the box was gone. The pieces were starting to come together. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. The crowd slowly began to disperse, but the tension still hung heavy in the air. Alex Carter, the royal guard, had returned to his original position, his tall black hat once again resting firmly on his head. To the onlookers, it might have seemed like the bullying had ended and life had returned to normal. But Alex knew better. His eyes remained locked ahead, but his mind was racing. Something wasn't right. The thugs, led by Darren Holt, might have seemed like a group of cocky troublemakers looking for internet fame, but Alex couldn't shake the feeling that it was more than that. And then there was the man in the worker's uniform, slipping into the shadows near the side gate. Alex had seen his hurried movements, the nervous glances, and most importantly, the box he was carrying. Everything about it felt wrong. Few people knew the truth about Alex. To most, he was just a ceremonial figure, a symbol of tradition guarding the palace gates. But in reality, Alex wasn't just a guard. He was a covert operative assigned to protect the palace from hidden threats. The uniform wasn't just for show, it was armor, a disguise that allowed him to observe and react without raising suspicion. And now, every instinct he had screamed that something dangerous was about to unfold. Alex's thoughts returned to the old man with the cane. There had been something about him, the way he stood, the way he spoke. Alex had recognized the strength in his posture and the sharpness in his eyes. That wasn't just some elderly tourist defending him. That man was ex-military. The tap of the cane on the cobblestones had been deliberate. It wasn't random, it was a warning signal Alex had learned during his own service. The message was clear: be ready, something's coming. Alex fought the urge to look for the man in the crowd. He couldn't break formation, not yet, but his mind filed the information away. The old man might be the ally he needed when things escalated. Out of the corner of his eye, Alex saw Darren and his crew hadn't gone far. They lingered at the edge of the courtyard, their phones still recording as they muttered among themselves. "What was that?" Ryan hissed, glancing nervously at Darren. He grabbed the hat like he's some kind of ninja. "Shut up," Darren snapped. "He's nothing, just a guy in a costume." "Then why does he look like he's watching us?" one of the others asked. "He's not watching anything," Darren barked, but his voice didn't sound as sure as before. Alex noticed the shift in their tone. Darren was losing control of his gang, and panic was starting to set in. But Alex also noticed something else. Their eyes kept drifting toward the side gate. They know something. While Darren and his thugs tried to play it cool, Alex's focus shifted back to the side gate. Another man in a similar worker's uniform had joined the first, this one wheeling out a large crate on a trolley. Alex's mind pieced it together. A delivery disguised as routine maintenance? No, it was too organized, too timed with the distraction created by Darren's group. This wasn't random. This was a heist. But what were they after? Alex knew the protocol. He wasn't supposed to move unless the situation became life-threatening. But waiting wasn't an option anymore. He needed more information. With the slightest motion, barely noticeable to the crowd, Alex pressed a button hidden inside his glove. The microphone embedded in his collar activated, connecting him directly to the palace security room. "This is Sentinel-1, he said softly. "We have a breach near the loading dock. Request immediate surveillance." "Copy that," came the response. "Confirm visual?" 2 suspects in worker uniforms, one carrying a box, the other pushing a crate. Possible accomplices lingering in the courtyard. Keep eyes on the thugs. Alex ended the transmission and returned to his statue-like stance, but his muscles stayed coiled, ready to move. Suddenly, the old man with the cane reappeared, stepping quietly beside Alex. He didn't look directly at him, but his voice was low and steady. "You see it too, don't you?" the man said, pretending to examine the palace gates. Alex didn't respond aloud but gave the faintest nod. "The loading dock," the old man continued. "It's a drop-off. They're smuggling something out of the palace." Alex kept his focus forward. "Who are you?" "Just an old soldier who knows the smell of trouble." The man tapped his cane once. "I'll keep the crowd busy. You stop what's coming." And just like that, he walked off into the crowd. Meanwhile, Darren was growing more restless. He could feel the tension shifting in the air, and his instincts told him the game was almost up. "We need to get out of here," Ryan said nervously. "Not until we're done," Darren hissed. "Keep the cameras rolling. We can't let up now." He turned back toward Alex and grinned, louder than ever. "Hey, soldier boy," he called out, throwing his arms wide. "You think you scared me? Nah, mate. I'm just getting started." He took a step closer, but this time Alex didn't wait. He moved. It wasn't much, just one sharp step forward, hand resting firmly on the hilt of his sword, but it was enough. Darren stopped mid-step, his grin fading as he stumbled backward. "What the?" Alex's voice, calm but commanding, rang out loud enough for everyone to hear. "You're done. Walk away, now." For the first time, Darren looked scared. But before anyone could react, a loud crash came from the loading dock, followed by the sound of shouting and breaking glass. The crowd turned, gasping. Alex didn't hesitate. Breaking protocol completely, he moved toward the sound, sword at the ready. Behind him, Darren Holt and his thugs froze, their cocky grins replaced by wide-eyed panic. "Mate, he's actually doing something," Ryan whispered, his phone still streaming the scene. Darren's lips twitched, torn between pride and fear. "Keep filming. This just got interesting." But Alex wasn't thinking about Darren anymore. The loud crash from the loading dock had shattered any doubts he had. This wasn't just an act of bullying, it was a cover for something much bigger. When Alex rounded the corner, he found two men in worker uniforms near the loading dock, frantically trying to load a large crate into the back of a delivery truck. One of them was shouting into a phone while the other was pushing the crate with enough force to crack its wooden edges. "Move it faster. They'll be here any second." Alex's sharp eyes locked onto the exposed corner of the crate. Inside, wrapped in protective fabric, glinted polished gold, the unmistakable shimmer of royal artifacts. "Smugglers, freeze." Alex's voice rang out, commanding and sharp. The man with the phone spun around, eyes widening when he saw Alex approaching with his sword drawn. "Who the hell is this guy?" "The guard," the other hissed. "He's supposed to just stand there. What's he doing here?" But Alex wasn't waiting for answers. He stepped closer, his sword angled down but ready to strike. "Step away from the crate," he ordered, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Forget him?" The man with the phone snapped. "Finish loading it." But before he could make another move, the old man with the cane appeared behind them. "Bad idea," the old man said, his voice calm but firm. "Put it down and step back." "Who the hell are you?" The smuggler barked. "Someone who's had more fights than you've had bad ideas." The old man swung his cane low, sweeping the legs out from under one of the workers, sending him sprawling onto the pavement. The second worker turned to run, but Alex stepped in his path. With a swift movement, he knocked the man's legs out from under him, sending him crashing into the side of the truck. The crate teetered, threatening to fall, but Alex steadied it with his free hand. "Stay down," Alex barked, his sword glinting as he pointed it toward the men. The sound of sirens echoed in the distance, but Alex knew the situation wasn't over yet. He turned back toward the courtyard, where Darren and his thugs were still filming. "Get him," Darren shouted, pointing at Alex. They're distracted, grabbed the crate. Two of the thugs bolted toward the loading dock, while Darren and Ryan stayed behind, shouting directions. The old man gave Alex a sharp look. "I'll handle these two, go after the others." Without hesitation, Alex took off toward the courtyard. Darren saw him coming and smirked, pulling something from his jacket, a pocket knife. "You don't scare me," Darren shouted, flipping the blade open. Alex didn't slow down. He closed the distance in seconds, swinging his sword in a controlled arc, knocking the knife clean out of Darren's hand and sending it clattering across the pavement. Darren stumbled backward, holding his wrist. "What the hell?" Ryan dropped his phone, finally realizing that this wasn't just a prank anymore. He turned to run, but Alex caught him by the arm and spun him back around. "Stay down," Alex said, shoving him to the ground. Ryan didn't argue. Darren, however, wasn't done. He grabbed a nearby trash can and hurled it toward Alex. But Alex sidestepped it easily. "This isn't how this was supposed to go," Darren shouted, his voice cracking. "And yet, here we are," Alex replied. The sirens grew louder as police cars skidded to a stop outside the palace gates. Officers poured out, surrounding the courtyard and the loading dock. "Drop your weapons," an officer barked, his gun trained on Darren. Darren hesitated, looking at Alex, then at the police, and finally at the hundreds of cameras still pointed at him. Defeated, he raised his hands. Ryan followed suit, and the other thugs froze in place as the officers swarmed them. As the situation calmed, Alex's commanding officer approached. "Carter, you're gonna have to explain this one." Alex sheathed his sword and straightened his posture. "Smuggling operation, using the crowd distraction as cover." His officer nodded. "We'll sort out the details later. For now, good work." But Alex wasn't done yet. He turned toward Darren, who was being loaded into the police van. "You think this is over?" Darren shouted. "You think you stopped us? This was just the start." Alex didn't respond. He simply watched as Darren was taken away, because deep down, Alex knew Darren wasn't bluffing. The crowd outside Buckingham Palace had thinned, leaving only the lingering hum of conversations and the occasional camera flash. The tourists who had come for photos and lighthearted memories were now leaving with something else: shock, awe, and questions. But for Alex Carter, the royal guard who had broken formation to stop a smuggling operation, there was no time to relax. He stood near the loading dock, his polished boots planted firmly, but his mind raced. Darren Holt and his gang were in police custody. The smugglers had been arrested, and the stolen artifacts were being loaded back into the palace under heavy guard. On the surface, it seemed like a victory. But Alex wasn't convinced. His gut told him this was too clean, too easy. Darren's final words echoed in his ears. This was just the start, and Alex had learned long ago to trust his instincts. Jack, the old man with the cane, stood nearby, watching his officers question the arrested smugglers. "Not bad for a day's work," Jack said, stepping closer. Alex didn't respond right away. He glanced toward the police van, where Darren sat, still smirking even as the doors slammed shut. "Doesn't feel finished?" Alex said finally. Jack raised an eyebrow. "What are you thinking?" Darren wasn't in charge, Alex said, keeping his voice low. He was too reckless, too loud. This whole thing was meant to create chaos, not cover up the real crime. Jack's eyes narrowed. "You're saying someone else is pulling the strings?" Alex nodded, and Darren knows who. Jack leaned on his cane. "So what's the plan?" Alex's eyes drifted to the loading dock, where the crate of artifacts had been unpacked for inventory. His instincts flared again. "This isn't over," Alex said. "We dig deeper." Alex joined the officers inspecting the artifacts. Inside the crate were golden scepters, jeweled crowns, and royal treasures, each carefully wrapped to avoid damage. But something didn't sit right. Alex ran his fingers along the edge of the crate, pausing when his hand caught on something, a tiny marking etched into the wood. A symbol. Jack noticed his reaction. "What is it?" Alex leaned closer. The symbol was subtle but unmistakable, a serpent coiled around a dagger. "Serpent's coil," Alex whispered. Jack stiffened. "You're kidding." The Serpent's Coil was more than just a gang. It was an underground syndicate known for smuggling priceless artifacts, often operating under layers of misdirection and using expendable frontmen like Darren and his thugs. "This isn't about a livestream prank," Alex said. "It's bigger." Darren was a pawn. Jack frowned. "If Serpent's Coil is involved, this goes deeper than the palace. They're international." Alex's thoughts raced. Darren had been loud and careless, but the real danger was whoever had planned the heist, and they were still out there. The smugglers who had been arrested were staying silent, too silent. Alex knew what that meant. They were more afraid of whoever was in charge than they were of prison. But Darren? He was cocky, not careful. He might break. With his commanding officer's permission, Alex entered the police interrogation room, where Darren sat in cuffs, leaning back in his chair like he didn't have a care in the world. "Well, if it isn't the tin soldier," Darren said, smirking. "What, you here to practice standing still?" Alex pulled out a chair and sat down across from him. "You think this is funny?" Darren shrugged. "A little." "Not for long," Alex said, leaning in. "Because you don't get it, do you? You're not walking out of here. Not today. Not tomorrow. And if you don't talk, not ever." Darren's smirk faltered, but he quickly recovered. "I didn't steal anything." "No," Alex said. "You just created the chaos so someone else could. That makes you an accessory, and your friends out there? They'll testify against you the moment things get tough." Darren's jaw tightened. Alex didn't stop. "But there's something bigger here, isn't there? You didn't plan this. You're not smart enough." Darren slammed his cuffed hands against the table. "Watch your mouth." Alex leaned closer, his voice low and calm. "Then prove me wrong. Tell me who's really behind this." For the first time, Darren hesitated. "They'll kill me," Darren said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not if we stop them first," Alex said. But we can't do that if you don't help us. Darren looked away, his walls starting to crumble. You don't get it, he said. They're everywhere. They don't leave loose ends. Alex's patience was running out. Who, Darren? Darren swallowed hard before muttering a name. Victor Cain. Jack, listening outside the room, stiffened at the name. He pushed open the door. Victor Cain, Jack repeated. As in the broker? Alex looked to Jack. Who is he? Jack's face darkened. He doesn't steal artifacts. He sells them. High-end buyers, secret auctions, the kind of clients who don't care where their treasures come from. Alex stood, his mind already working through the possibilities. Where is he now? Alex demanded. Darren shook his head. I don't know. He doesn't show his face, but he's got people inside the palace. Alex's blood ran cold, an inside man. Jack spoke quickly. We need to lock down the palace. No one in or out until we find out who's working with him. But Darren wasn't finished. You're too late, he said, a bitter smile on his lips. They're already inside, and they're not done. Alex's fists clenched. Darren might have been bluffing, but his words hit too close to what Alex had already suspected. This wasn't just about one heist. It was part of something much bigger. Alex hurried back toward the security command room inside Buckingham Palace, his footsteps echoing through the marble halls. Jack, the old man with the cane, followed closely behind, his sharp eyes scanning every shadow as they moved. I told you this wasn't over, Alex said, pushing open the door to the control room. A cluster of security officers turned toward him, their faces tense. Monitors displayed live feeds of every corner of the palace, corridors, storage rooms, and gates, but nothing looked out of place. Yet, Alex turned to the head of palace security, a stocky man named Graham Wells. We need a lockdown. Now, Graham frowned. On what grounds? There's a mole, Alex said, and we just confirmed the smuggling ring isn't finished. The officers exchanged uneasy glances, but Graham hesitated. You're talking about locking down the Queen's residence. That's not a decision we can take lightly. Jack stepped forward, tapping his cane on the floor. Then make it quick, because whoever's in here isn't going to wait for us to finish debating. Graham studied Alex for a moment, then nodded sharply. Do it. The alarms blared moments later. The gates sealed shut, and security officers moved through the halls, locking doors and sweeping the premises. The tension inside the palace grew heavier with every passing second. Guards patrolled the halls in pairs, their radios crackling with updates, but Alex's focus was on the loading dock camera feeds. He rewound the footage from earlier that day, his eyes narrowing as he paused on the worker carrying the box, the one who had vanished during the distraction. Zoom in, Alex ordered. The image sharpened, and Alex's stomach twisted. The worker's badge number didn't match the palace registry. He's not staff, Alex said, his voice grim, and he didn't leave the building. Jack leaned closer, so he's still inside. Alex's hand hovered over the microphone, preparing to alert the team, but then the power flickered. The monitors blinked and half the cameras went dark. Damn it, Graham swore. They've hacked the system. Alex didn't wait. He grabbed his radio and barked orders. Teams 1 and 2, sweep the east wing. Team 3, secure the artifact vault. Jack grabbed a button from a nearby locker and fell in beside Alex. You're coming with me? Alex asked, surprised. Jack smirked. Try and stop me. They moved quickly, heading toward the artifact storage room, where the most valuable treasures were kept. The corridors felt too quiet, and Alex's grip tightened on his sword. Halfway there, a shout echoed down the hall. They're in the vault. Alex and Jack broke into a run. When they reached the artifact vault, they found 2 guards unconscious on the floor. The heavy steel door was slightly ajar. They're inside, Jack hissed, raising his baton. Alex didn't hesitate. He pushed the door open, stepping into the dimly lit room. Shelves lined the walls, filled with jewels, crowns, and golden artifacts. But the thieves weren't after everything. They were focused on a single display case at the back. Alex spotted the worker in the stolen uniform, along with 2 more men, stuffing an ancient golden scepter into a black bag. Stop, Alex barked. One of the men spun around, pulling a knife from his belt. Jack moved first, swinging his cane to knock the knife aside. The man stumbled, but the second thief grabbed a crowbar, charging at Alex. Alex ducked, sidestepping the swing and using his sword to disarm the attacker with a quick, practiced motion. The crowbar clattered to the ground, and Alex followed up with a hard kick, sending the thief crashing into a display case. Jack pinned the third man against the wall, using his cane to hold him in place. Don't even think about it, Jack growled. The worker, the one who had disappeared earlier, tried to slip through the back door, but Alex was faster. He blocked the exit, leveling his sword at the man's chest. End of the line, Alex said. But then the worker smiled. You think this is the end, he sneered. You got no idea what's coming. Alex's eyes narrowed. Who are you working for? The man grinned wider. You already know the name, Victor Cain. And this? He gestured to the bag. This is just the beginning. Before Alex could react, the man pulled something from his pocket. A remote detonator. Don't move. Alex shouted, but the man's thumb hovered over the button. You can't stop us, he said. Not this time. But Jack was already moving. The old man lunged forward, slamming his cane into the man's wrist, knocking the detonator loose. It hit the ground, sliding across the floor. Alex lunged, kicking the device away before the man could grab it. You were saying? Jack muttered, pinning the man's arm behind his back. The man struggled, but Alex grabbed the black bag and stepped back, holding the scepter. Looks like this is staying where it belongs, Alex said. By the time reinforcements arrived, the vault was secure, and the thieves were in cuffs. The stolen artifacts were accounted for, but Alex's unease hadn't faded. As he stood in the vault, looking at the shattered display case, Jack stepped beside him. You did good, kid, Jack said. Alex didn't respond right away. They're not done, Alex said quietly. Victor Cain isn't going to stop. Jack nodded grimly. Then neither do we. Alex's eyes drifted to the security monitors as the screens flickered back to life. Somewhere out there, Cain was still watching. And Alex knew the real fight hadn't even begun. This wasn't just a robbery, Alex said quietly. It was a message. Jack nodded. They wanted us to know they're still in control. And Cain, he shook his head. He's not done. Alex's jaw tightened. Victor Cain's name had already spread like poison through the investigation. Darren had confessed to working under Cain's network, and the symbol on the crate, the coiled serpent, confirmed Cain's involvement. But Darren was just a pawn, and the men in the vault? They were expendable. Cain wouldn't stop until the real prize was his. Jack's voice pulled Alex back. There's something else, Jack said, gesturing toward the security monitors. The palace's cameras were back online, but one feed caught Alex's attention. It showed the utility tunnels beneath the palace, dark, narrow passages rarely used. Except now, they weren't empty. Two figures moved through the shadows, dressed in black. One of them carried a bag, identical to the one the thieves in the vault had used. They're still here, Alex said, his blood running cold. Jack's expression darkened. Looks like we interrupted part of the job, but not all of it. Alex grabbed his radio. Control, I need 2 teams in the lower tunnels. Now? No. Jack shook his head. By the time they get down there, Cain's men will be gone. Alex understood immediately. They couldn't wait. The tunnels beneath Buckingham Palace were a maze, low ceilings, flickering lights, and walls that seemed to press inward. The air was thick and musty, making it hard to breathe. Alex led the way, his sword in one hand, a flashlight in the other. Jack followed, his cane tapping softly on the stone floor. Doesn't feel right, Jack muttered. Alex didn't disagree. It felt like walking into a trap. They followed the faint echo of footsteps ahead, moving quietly but quickly. The sound of shifting crates and hurried whispers grew louder as they closed in. Then Alex saw them. 2 men, both wearing masks, crouched over another crate, this one much larger than the first. Freeze. Alex shouted, his voice echoing off the walls. The men spun around. One bolted immediately, disappearing into the shadows. The other reached for a gun, but Jack was faster. Jack's cane slammed down on the man's wrist, knocking the weapon loose. Alex lunged, grabbing the man by the collar and shoving him against the wall. Who sent you? Alex growled. The man glared but didn't answer. Don't waste your breath, Jack said. These guys never talk. Alex's eyes dropped to the crate where something gleamed beneath the dim light. It wasn't an artifact. It was a bomb. Get back, Jack shouted. Alex released the man and pulled Jack away as the thief scrambled toward the tunnel exit. Alex's focus, however, was locked on the bomb timer ticking down. 2 minutes. Tell me this is fake, Jack muttered. Alex knelt beside it, his heart pounding. The wires looked professional, too professional for the kind of thugs they'd caught earlier. Cain's work, Alex said grimly. Can you stop it? Not here. Alex's eyes darted around the room. We need to get it outside, away from the palace. Jack didn't hesitate. Let's move. Alex hoisted the crate carefully, cradling the bomb as he and Jack raced back through the tunnels. The timer kept ticking. 1:45. Go faster, Jack urged. They burst out into the loading dock, startling the officers stationed there. Clear the area, Alex barked. Now. The guards scattered as Alex and Jack hauled the crate out into the open courtyard. 1:10. Put it down, Jack shouted. We'll shield it. Alex lowered the crate and stepped back, gripping his sword tightly. If the device detonated, their only chance was containing the blast. As the final seconds ticked down, Alex spotted movement at the gate. A black SUV had pulled up. Behind the wheel sat a man in a dark suit, his eyes locked on Alex. Cain, Jack muttered. Alex's pulse quickened. It had to be him. Cain smirked, tapping his watch. He wasn't here to save his men. He was here to watch the palace burn. But then the timer hit 0. And nothing happened. It's a dummy, Alex realized. Jack exhaled sharply. He wanted us to panic. Cain's plan had worked. He'd tied up resources, distracted the team, and exposed vulnerabilities in palace security. But he hadn't won. Alex locked eyes with Cain, raising his sword slightly. It wasn't just a gesture. It was a promise. And Cain knew it. The SUV peeled away, leaving nothing but the fading sound of tires against the pavement. As the bomb squad arrived to secure the fake device, Alex and Jack stepped aside. He's not done, Jack said quietly. Cain's testing us. That fake bomb? That wasn't a failure. It was a message. Alex nodded. He wanted to see how far he could push us. Now he knows our defenses and our weaknesses. Then let's make sure he walks straight into a trap, Jack replied, a grim smile spreading across his face. Alex turned to Graham Wells, the head of security. We need to move fast, Alex said. Cain's men are still in the tunnels. They're moving something bigger this time, and Cain won't let them fail. Graham's face hardened. What's the plan? Alex grabbed a blueprint of the palace tunnels and laid it out. We're going to force Cain into the open, Alex said. We make him think the palace is still vulnerable. Step 1. The decoy. The security team staged a mock evacuation, making it look like the palace was clearing out staff and artifacts. Step 2. Cutting off escape routes. Guards disguised as staff were positioned throughout the tunnels. Exit points were sealed, leading Cain and his men with one way out, straight into the ambush. Step 3. Surveillance bait. Alex, disguised in plain clothes, would follow the same route as the artifacts, letting Cain's team think they finally found their target. It was risky, but Alex knew Cain's ego wouldn't let him stay hidden. By midnight, the palace's main hall was quiet. Cameras showed workers loading crates, reinforcing the illusion of an evacuation. But hidden in the shadows, Alex and Jack waited. Any sign of him? Jack whispered. Alex's earpiece crackled. Movement in the tunnels, Graham reported. 2 men spotted near the east wing, armed. Jack smirked. They brought backup. Alex didn't flinch. So did we. The sound of footsteps echoed in the tunnels. Alex's pulse quickened. The monitor showed 3 figures emerging near the loading dock, 2 thugs, and 1 man who walked with an air of calculated confidence. Victor Cain. Showtime, Jack muttered. Cain's sharp eyes swept the room, lingering on the crates marked for transport. There it is, Cain said, pointing to one of the crates. The dagger's in there. Move it. His men stepped forward, but Alex was already in motion. Alex stepped out from behind a stack of crates, sword drawn. That's far enough, Alex said, his voice cutting through the silence. Cain's eyes narrowed. You again. Should have stayed at your post, soldier. Jack emerged beside Alex, his cane tapping the floor. I've got this one, Jack said with a grin. Cain's men reacted fast, pulling knives and lunging forward. Jack swung his cane low, knocking one attacker's legs out from under him. The second man turned toward Alex, but Alex sidestepped the blade, striking with the flat of his sword and sending the weapon clattering to the ground. Cain didn't move. He just watched, his confidence still intact. You think this changes anything? Cain sneered. You have no idea what you're up against. Alex stepped closer. Why don't you enlighten me? Cain pulled out a small detonator and held it up. Back off, Cain growled, or this place lights up. But Alex didn't flinch. We've already shut down your explosives, Alex said calmly. Your little distractions are gone. This is over. Cain's smirk faltered for the first time. You're bluffing. Try me, Alex replied, his sword steady. Cain's eyes flickered to the crates, searching for an escape. but Jack stepped forward, blocking his path. "It's over," Jack said. "Drop it." Cain's jaw tightened. He pressed the button, but nothing happened. "No signal," Alex said, holding up a signal jammer. "Like I said, this is over." Before Cain could react, Jack swung his cane, knocking the detonator out of Cain's hand. Alex moved in, twisting Cain's arm behind his back and forcing him to the ground. "Game over," Alex said as officers swarmed in, placing handcuffs on Cain and his remaining men. By dawn, Cain and his crew were in custody. The stolen artifacts were secure, and the palace returned to normal. But as Alex stood by the gates, dressed once again in his Royal Guard uniform, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Jack joined him, leaning on his cane. "You did good, soldier," Jack said. Alex smiled faintly. "Thanks, but I don't think Cain's connections are done yet." Jack smirked. "Good. I'm not done either." They watched as tourists snapped photos and admired the palace, blissfully unaware of how close they'd come to disaster. And for Alex, that was enough, because the Royal Guard wasn't just about standing still. It was about standing ready. The sun rose slowly over Buckingham Palace, its golden rays illuminating the ancient stone walls. Tourists were already gathering outside the gates, their cameras clicking as they admired the guards in their crisp red uniforms. To them, it was just another peaceful morning. But inside the palace, the aftermath of the night's chaos was still unfolding. In the palace's security control room, Alex Carter stood with his arms crossed, watching as Victor Cain and his men were loaded into police vans outside the palace gates. "You sure he's not getting out of this one?" Jack asked, leaning on his cane. Alex didn't take his eyes off the monitor. "Not this time," Alex said. "We've got Cain on breaking and entering, attempted theft, smuggling, and resisting arrest. Add in the fake explosives, and he's looking at decades behind bars." Jack smirked. "I almost feel sorry for the guy." Alex didn't smile. "Don't." He knew what he was doing. He didn't just want money. He wanted to humiliate the monarchy, to prove we couldn't protect this place. Jack tapped his cane. "And now, we proved him wrong." Alex's expression softened just slightly. "Yeah, we did." But Alex's instincts told him it wasn't over. He turned back to the blueprints of the tunnels spread out across the table. His men might be locked up, but Cain didn't build this alone, Alex said. Someone gave him inside information. Jack's smile faded. "You still think there's a mole?" Alex nodded. "We need to find out who." Moments later, Alex's earpiece buzzed. "We have something," said Graham Wells, the head of security. "One of the smugglers is talking." Alex and Jack followed Graham to the interrogation room, where one of Cain's men, his face bruised and his hands cuffed, was slumped in a chair. "He cut a deal," Graham said. "Wants protection." Alex stepped forward. "Talk." The man glanced nervously at the guards outside before speaking. "It wasn't just Cain," he said. "He had help inside the palace, someone who told him where the artifacts were stored, how to bypass the cameras, even the patrol schedules." "Who?" Alex demanded. The man hesitated, then muttered, "Edward Daniels." Alex's stomach dropped. Daniels was the assistant to the palace curator, the man responsible for overseeing the artifacts and security protocols. Jack cursed under his breath. "I knew something felt off about that guy." Alex and Jack moved quickly. Daniels wasn't in his office. "He's running," Alex said, his heart pounding. They rushed toward the loading dock, where Daniels was already climbing into a delivery van. "Stop him," Alex shouted. Daniels gunned the engine, but Jack stepped forward, slamming his cane into the windshield. The glass cracked, and Daniels swerved, hitting the brake just as Alex pulled the door open and dragged him out. "Going somewhere?" Alex said. Daniels' face was pale. "You don't understand. Cain's people will kill me." "Not my problem," Alex snapped, cuffing him. "You chose this." With Daniels in custody, the full picture finally emerged. He had leaked floor plans, patrol schedules, and security codes to Cain's network in exchange for money and protection. But Cain had betrayed him, leaving him to take the fall if things went wrong. "Greedy and stupid," Jack muttered. "Bad combination." Daniels' confession sealed the case. With his testimony, the police raided Cain's warehouses, uncovering millions in stolen artifacts and illegal deals. By the next morning, Buckingham Palace returned to normal. The tourists had no idea how close the palace had come to disaster, and the guards at the gate resumed their silent vigil. But Alex knew things had changed. As the crowds moved on, Alex stood tall, his silhouette sharp against the morning sun. He wasn't just guarding the gates. He was guarding the past and the future. And no matter what came next, he would be ready, because that's what royal guards do.